Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Say, by the way, I hope you had an absolutely fantastic Easter, celebrating the resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ, the absolutely most fantastic event in the entire history of mankind. There's nothing that even comes close to comparing to that event. It is the foundation of everything. So, anyway, personally, I think we ought to celebrate that every single day of our life. It is the foundation of everything for us as Christians. Well, we're looking at what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24 when the disciples asked him about signs of the end of the age. And he told them that there would be wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, famines. These are the beginning of the birth pangs, he said. But he also said that included it within that matrix of events is that they will deliver you up to be persecuted. You will be hated of all men for my name's sake. Now, it is absolutely critical to understand that once again, as I've already pointed out, Jesus was drawing upon, incorporating, and shall we say commenting on the traditional Jewish narrative. Now obviously he was applying it to his disciples, as we shall see as we continue. But in the Jewish narrative, in the last days, in the last generation, you would have the appearance of Elijah. Elijah would come before the coming of the great and the terrible day of the Lord. Malachi chapter 4, verse 5 and 6. And we're going to have more to say about that on Friday as we continue our review in response to Sam Frost's book, The Parousia of the Son of Man. And I'll be sharing more from my book on Elijah has come, a solution to Romans 11, 25 to 27. But in the Jewish narrative, you have the coming of Elijah. You have a time of tribulation. That time of tribulation would be for the purifying of the elect, of the righteous remnant. And what we find throughout the entirety of the New Testament is the concept that the righteous remnant was being called. They were being called into Christ. They were being purified by the persecution that was coming against them. And they were waiting imminently for the imminent coming of the Lord in judgment, the kingdom, and the resurrection. This motif of suffering before the judgment, suffering and persecution before the resurrection, suffering and persecution before the parousia, dominates the New Testament text. And here's something that you absolutely must catch the power of its reality. Now, understand, please, that in the dispensational paradigm, iterated by men such as Dwight Pentecost, John Walvoord, Thomas Ice, on and on and on it goes. In that paradigm, after the rapture, you have a period of 3.5 years of peace. The man of sin has signed a peace treaty with Israel. They get to rebuild the temple. In the middle of the 7 years, he breaks the treaty, and then comes the great tribulation. Then comes the period of persecution. Here's what you absolutely must catch. In the dispensational paradigm, it is Israel that is persecuted by the Antichrist. We are told repeatedly that Matthew chapter 24 is about the time after the rapture. So it supposedly describes this 7-year period of time before the second appearing of Christ of Matthew 24, 29 to 31. There's a huge problem here, ladies and gentlemen. And listen to me. If you're a dispensationalist, I want to appeal to you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to share with you. In Matthew chapter 24, pardon me, Jesus said, they will deliver you. Well, in the first place, who is the you here? Those are his disciples. They are what we will come to know as Christians. That's point number one. So, point number one is that if it is true, and I emphasize if it is true that Jesus is describing a situation after the rapture and before the second coming, then it is the persecution of the followers of Christ. It is not the Jews as a nation unconverted to Christ. Remember, in the dispensational paradigm, the Jews are persecuted, and it is only at the height of that persecution do they ever ostensibly call on Jesus and come to believe in him. Well, that's not verse 9. This persecution is of the followers of Christ. In the dispensational paradigm, Israel doesn't become the followers of Christ until after the tribulation, after the persecution, you see. The timeline doesn't work, but that's not all. Look at the parallel. Boy, I tell you, the allergies here in southern Oklahoma. Okay. In the parallel passage of Mark chapter 13, notice what Jesus says. Now remember, this is directly parallel to Matthew chapter 24. Mark 13 gives us a little bit more specific information. You know, in Mark 13 verse 8, just like in Matthew 24, the nation shall rise against nation, earthquakes, famine, pestilence, etc. But watch out for yourself, Mark 13, 9. Who are the yourselves? His disciples. They will deliver you up to synagogues, to councils, and to synagogues. You will be beaten in the synagogues. You will be brought before rulers and kings for my name's sake, for a testimony to them. Now, wait a minute. Who's doing the persecuting here? It's not the Antichrist. The word councils here is from the Greek word synedrios, if I pronounce that correctly. It's the word that is translated as Sanhedrins. You see, every city that was able to have a quorum, that was able to have a sufficient number of Jewish elders could have a Sanhedrin. Then you had the great Sanhedrin at Jerusalem. But what is a Sanhedrin? It's a gathering. It is a Jewish court. It is not a European court. What does that mean? This means, and of course he says, they will bring you before the Sanhedrians, and they will bring you before the synagogues. Folks, that's not churches. Not in our sense of the word. Sanhedrins, synagogues. They will bring you before the Sanhedrins. They will bring you into the synagogues and persecute you. Folks, this is Jewish persecution of the followers of Jesus. This turns the dispensational paradigm upside down. It completely, totally refutes the dispensational narrative, what's supposed to happen during this supposed 7-year period. You cannot have Matthew 24 and Mark 13 being all about persecution of Jews after the church has been supposedly removed. You see, this is persecution of the followers of Christ, i.e. the church. Well, how did the church get raptured out of here, and yet it's being brought before Sanhedrins and synagogues to be persecuted by the Jews? Do you catch the power of that? Well, I tell you what, we've got a whole lot more here. And in the meantime, don't forget, we don't have a whole lot of time left in this month of April. And for the month of April, 2019, my book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, regularly $23.95 plus $4.95 shipping. Your total delivered price, $19.95. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com. Right up top, there's a banner that will guide you right through how to order this book. And look, I cover all of this because this is all part and parcel of understanding 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, where the saints were being persecuted by the Jews. Do you see that? All right. Look, we've got a whole lot more. So we're going to begin showing tomorrow and in the ensuing videos this motif of the persecution of the righteous elect, the righteous remnant, to purify them before the coming of the Lord. Look, this is great stuff. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you on the flip side.